Good, thank you.
Dr. Wang, thank you for taking the time.
Thank you, Andy. Yes.
So we're 1 month out from a U.S.-China summit in Beijing. When President Trump goes to Beijing, he's going to be the first U.S. president to visit for a decade. He was the last president to visit during his first term. How do you assess U.S.-China relations right now? And what are you hearing in Beijing about expectations for this summit and the outcome?
Yes, thank you, Andy, and thank Semafor for the invitation. I think this President Trump's visit to Beijing in about a month's time is so important, and also China-U.S. relations is the most important relations, I would say, bilateral relation in the world. I think the expectation of President Trump's visit is quite high, actually, in China too. First, I think that he comes, in a big historical time after decades. And then amidst all those geopolitical tensions, Iran conflicts and Russian war, whatever, so it's very important. But also bilaterally, we have so many things to talk about. I remember last time when President Xi and President Trump made a phone call, they said they're steered through a gigantic ship in a turbulent world. And then China and the U.S. can work together to do better things, greater things. So I would think that this visit, we will see they're going to probably stabilize the relations. Stability is probably the most important buzzword, I think, for both China and U.S. We need the stability, the world in the stability, just by just merely shaking hands. We send 1,000 images around the world. So that is really great. But of course, practically, we can still reach a lot of things. We can probably see how we can stabilize the trade frictions. We can see how we can balance the trade and also improve the global collaboration, but also particularly for the peace making that China is really working on right now.
Somebody said that President Trump is the least hawkish member of his own administration when it comes to China, and that from Beijing's perspective, there's never going to be a better chance to do a deal, whether that's on tech, trade, Taiwan. Does that ring true to you?
I think that's probably correct. President Trump, in that sense, is very practical. I mean, he was trying to invite President Xi to his inaugural speech. He wants to be the president of peace and unity. And I think that if he wants to be the peace and the unity, he needs China to collaborate. And so we do have a lot of bilateral issues. But I think in a global situation like this, in a multipolar world where U.S. and China, if they actually stay together, that will generate a huge benefit, not only for U.S. and China, but for the world. So I think we do have differences. Of course, we have a competition. We have a lot of different value and system. But after all, we are all the villagers of the global village. We have to really work together.
So we had Scott Bessent at dinner on Tuesday. Mm-hmm. And he said that one of the outcomes of the summit would be the establishment of a board of trade and a board of investment. Have you heard about this? How is it going to work? Also a white list, potentially a white list of Chinese companies that can be waved straight through into the United States.
Absolutely. That's a brilliant idea. I think that given that the importance of China and the U.S. in terms of trade and investment, particularly China investment, this green investment, this global investment, there's outbound, inbound investment flows. I think it's high time now U.S. and China works together. I remember President Trump during his campaign speech said if BYD set up a factory in Mexico, he's going to levy 200%. But if it's in the U.S., he's open to that.
Do you think that's going to happen?
Well, I think probably we need still a little bit of consensus building on that. But in the long run, I do see a benefit of massive Chinese investment to the U.S. That's what Japanese did in the 90s and 80s. And if we want to address this imbalance issue, one of the best ways really to attract more Chinese investment, manufacturing, that can help U.S. capability.
Well, Trump has said that he's open to the idea of having Chinese car companies. Today, Jim Farley, who's CEO of Ford, said the U.S. government should keep them out. How do you think it's going to play out?
No, I do think there's maybe a variety of opinions here at Washington, but I do think President Trump has a vision. He has a grand vision. He knows that two largest economies can't really at odds all the time. You need to find a way to really work together. And that's why he's so interested to come to China, and he's invited President Xi to come again to return the visit. And then there's another two summits we're going to see this year. So there's a lot of a round of high summit that we're going to expect.
Okay, how about the tough questions, Taiwan? A lot of speculation that China is going to try to get President Trump to say that the U.S. opposes Taiwan independence rather than it doesn't support it.
I think that's probably, U.S. could think about it because, after all, Taiwan is part of China. The old government recognizes Taiwan, is a province of China. That has been written in 184 countries when they set up diplomatic ties. And U.S. recognized Taiwan as part of China. If it's part of China and U.S. previous administration all oppose Taiwan, to not to get independent, whatever. They can probably say that. I would think if President Trump can say they support the peaceful unification, that would be hugely popular, I think, as well. Given that recent KMT chairwoman, Madame Zheng, visited Beijing, and there's a huge, normalizing relations between the parties of KMT and the CPP. So I would think this would be a great idea to do that.
Okay, since we're on the topic of Taiwan, a lot of concern among businesses represented here at this event about choke points. Strait of Hormuz, you have Panama, you have Malacca Strait, Suez Canal. But the biggest one, the most important one, is Taiwan. Mm-hmm. Every year for the last 3-4 years, the People's Liberation Army have been practicing for a blockade of Taiwan or an invasion. Should they be worried that China will pull the trigger on this?
No, I think that currently the situation is slowing down and normalized a bit. But of course, China always maintained that deterrence. If the separatist movement in Taiwan really got out of control or Taiwan really get independent, I mean, China reserves the right to unify its own country, one of its provinces. I think the opinion polls and also the KMT they are pro-reunion, and then they are the majority of the parliament in Taiwan. I would think, if they keep continuing this kind of a peaceful momentum, for example, China welcome all the Taiwanese coming to the mainland free of work and all the health, schooling, everything. And then also they opened all the entry points to Taiwanese. You can get the permit right on the spot of the entry.
Is there a date? Some people think 2027. That's when the PLA are going to try to take Taiwan. So other people say 2028.
Yeah. No, that's a purely speculation. I don't think you can find any official document. Chinese were saying that 2027. I think now with this historical visit, which happened in a decade time, that news has been debunked. Basically it doesn't exist. I think China wants peaceful unification. President Xi and Madame Zheng all stressed the peaceful unification. And also the Taiwanese actually went to mainland last year has doubled from 2 million previously to 4 million trips made. And there's 1 million, 2 million Taiwanese working in the mainland. There's 500,000 marriage across the street. The integration is so deep now, I don't think they're going to have a war on that if they really can work out the differences by themselves.
Okay, let's talk about Iran. Last week, President Xi Jinping said, the global order is crumbling into disarray. He didn't actually mention the United States. What did he mean by that?
No, I think, that's probably we're seeing this year. There's a lot of unexpected things happen. We see what happened with Venezuela, in Latin America. We suddenly, out of blue, saying this what happened in Iran because U.S. said last June they already obligated, already destroyed all the nuclear facilities. Certainly, what's the imminent threat for U.S. to get in there? So we don't want to see the law of a jungle or might is right? We need to really have some kind of procedures or either Congress or UN Security Council to do anything like that at kind of scale. But China this time is so different. And Foreign Minister Wang Yi has actually phoned 26 counterparts, including Israel and Iranians, and also all the Security Council members and all the other major European foreign ministers and things like that. And also, of course, Pakistan foreign minister was invited to Beijing, and they reached the 5-point of a peace proposal for Iranian conflict. And then we are seeing that Islamabad is become a mediator. Yeah. And now J.D. Vance, Vice President, is going there again. So we see that China probably is fully support and really making all its efforts to make this happen.
Very risky now. The U.S. Navy is blockading the Strait of Hormuz. There are Chinese flag vessels sailing in and out. Yeah. What would happen if the U.S. Navy interdicted a Chinese vessel?
I think this is temporary. I don't think that is the choking point can last for the war. I mean, first of all, it's no good for the Gulf country. All its allies of U.S. It's no good for Iran, for China, and rest of the world. So if U.S. is not benefiting from them, if the world economy clumps, and also we see that there's a lot of U.S. dollar-backed transaction is delayed or impacted. So I think in the long run, we need to open the Hormuz because certainly China depends on quite a bit of that too, but China is also diversifying. China green power is already, renewable power is already half of its capacity, and China can also buy more other countries too. So it's not really the end of the world for China, but I think it's good. Japan, South Korea, ASEAN, many other countries depend on that, and US and Europe. So we need to really stabilize the world by opening the Hormuz channel.
So we saw a U.S. Marine Expeditionary Force pulled out of Okinawa, the U.S. 7th Fleet redeploying to the Gulf. This is leaving a vacuum in Asia. Does China aspire to fill that vacuum?
Well, I mean, historically, I think for the last 45 years, China never invaded any other countries, never sent any soldier anywhere, never built up a military base.
Vietnam.
Yeah, Vietnam is in 1979. That was already 45 years ago. So I don't think that, China has that kind of expression. Confucius culture is that you cultivate your land. Four crops a year, you have to stay in your land. That kind of a Confucius culture, your parents are alive, you don't travel so far away.
So much pressure on Taiwan, so much sanctions on Japan, strategic pressure on South Korea, on the Philippines, all of the United States friends in Asia. What's the strategy here? What is Beijing attempting to achieve?
No, I think China is actually trying to normalize relations with better relations. Surrounding countries have become focused now. Vietnamese new chairman is just in Beijing right now, and also we are working with all the other countries. President Xi last year made only trips to the neighboring countries, ASEAN, Central Asia, also South Korea. So we work with all the neighboring countries to improve a better relation. Like U.S. did for Western Hemisphere, we want to make a good relation for
Dr. Wang, we could go on all day.
Sure.
We're out of time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you. Okay. Good.